best squash growing tips, boost yields, fight pests, and improve flavor. Hey there, fellow gardeners. Welcome back to Eco-Alchemy. I'm Pete, and today we're diving into the wonderful world of squash, one of the most rewarding crops you can grow. Whether you're dreaming of summer squash like zucchini and pattypan, or winter squash like butternut and acorn, get ready to harvest more than you ever thought possible. In this episode, we'll unlock the secrets to growing vigorous, pest-resistant squash plants that will keep producing all season long. We'll cover everything from planting tips and soil prep to avoiding common mistakes and battling those pesky vine borers. Plus, I'll share a few insider secrets for growing bigger, sweeter fruit. So, if squash has ever given you trouble, or if you're a complete beginner, this guide is for you. Let's get started on your squash growing adventure. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more plant growing secrets from Eco-Alchemy. Squash is a warm weather champion that thrives in full sun, rich soil, and plenty of space. Whether you choose to start from seed or transplant seedlings, remember that squash loves well-drained soil packed with organic matter and consistent moisture. Let's get those seeds started right. For those starting from seed, begin indoors about 3 to 4 weeks before your last frost date. If you prefer direct sowing, wait until the soil temperature is consistently above 65 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 degrees Celsius. With warm soil, you'll see those little sprouts emerge in just 5 to 10 days. Remember, patience is a virtue, but squash is quick to reward. Beginner tip: soaking your squash seeds in water for a few hours before planting can help speed up germination. It's a simple trick that can give you a head start. The first secret to growing amazing squash is proper spacing. Give summer squash varieties like zucchini at least 2 to 3 feet, 60 to 90 centimeters, between plants. For winter squash, especially vining types, you'll need even more space, up to 4 to 5 feet, 1.2 to 1.5 meters, apart. Trust me, they need the room. Crowded squash plants are more susceptible to powdery mildew, pest infestations, and ultimately smaller yields. If space is limited, consider growing vertically. Some varieties like delicata, acorn, or even zucchini can be trained up trellises with the right support. It's a great way to maximize your harvest in a small garden. Beginner tip: when growing vertically, make sure your trellis is sturdy enough to support the weight of the mature squash. You don't want your hard work to come crashing down. Squash plants are heavy feeders, so rich, fertile soil is essential. Before planting, amend your garden beds with plenty of well-rotted compost, worm castings, or aged manure. These organic amendments will provide a slow-release source of nutrients that your squash will love. A balanced organic fertilizer, such as a 5-5-5 or 4-6-3 blend, can be added at planting and again mid-season when the plants start to flower. For container gardening, use a deep pot with at least 5 gallons, 19 liters of soil per plant. Refresh the nutrients every few weeks with a diluted liquid fertilizer. Your squash will thank you with abundant fruit. Beginner tip: don't over-fertilize. Too much nitrogen can lead to lush foliage but fewer fruits. A balanced approach is best. One of the most common mistakes gardeners make with squash is inconsistent watering. These plants need about 1 to 1.5 inches, 2.5 to 3.8 centimeters of water per week, especially during flowering and fruiting. Consistent moisture is key to preventing blossom end rot and ensuring juicy, delicious squash. A deep, weekly soak is much better than shallow, frequent watering. Mulching around the base of the plants helps maintain soil moisture, suppress weeds, and reduce the risk of rot and mildew. Straw, wood chips, or even shredded leaves make excellent mulch. Beginner tip: water early in the morning to allow the foliage to dry before nightfall. This helps prevent fungal diseases. Now, let's talk about pests, because squash has a few major enemies. The biggest troublemakers are squash vine borers, squash bugs, and cucumber beetles. But don't worry, with a little vigilance, you can protect your plants. Squash vine borers are the most destructive. They bore into the base of the stem and kill the plant from the inside out. The best defense is prevention. Use floating row covers early in the season to block the adult moths. Wrap the base of the stem with foil or pantyhose to stop larvae from boring in. Check your plants weekly for sawdust-like frass, a warning sign of an active borer. Squash bugs look like gray shield-shaped beetles and lay small bronze eggs on the undersides of leaves. The key to controlling them is early, consistent inspection. Remove eggs by hand or with tape and crush nymphs before they mature. Interplanting squash with nasturtiums or radishes can help repel squash bugs. Planting trap crops like blue Hubbard squash nearby may lure pests away from your main planting. Beginner tip: regularly inspect your squash plants, especially the undersides of leaves, for signs of pests or diseases. Early detection is crucial for effective control. Squash plants produce both male and female flowers. For fruit to form, pollen must be transferred from the male to the female flower. If you're not getting fruit even though flowers are blooming, poor pollination is likely the issue. Don't worry, you can help. You can hand pollinate using a small paintbrush or increase pollinator activity by planting nearby flowers like borage, calendula, or cosmos. These flowers attract bees and other beneficial insects that will help with pollination. Here's a quick way to tell the difference between male and female flowers. Male flowers have a thin stem and no swelling behind the bloom, while female flowers have a tiny baby fruit at the base. Pollinate in the morning when the flowers are open for the best results. Beginner tip: if you're hand pollinating, gently transfer pollen from the male flower to the stigma of the female flower. It's a delicate process, but it can make a big difference in your harvest. When it comes to harvesting, timing is everything. For summer squash, you want to pick the fruit early and often, usually when they're 6 to 8 inches, 15 to 20 centimeters long. Waiting too long gives you tough, watery squash and slows down the plant's productivity. Harvest with pruners or a knife to avoid damaging the stem. For winter squash, let the fruit fully mature on the vine. The skin should be hard, and the stem should turn brown and corky. Cure them in a warm, dry spot for a couple of weeks to improve storage life and flavor. Curing allows the squash to develop its full sweetness and flavor. Beginner tip: don't be afraid to taste your summer squash as it grows. This will help you determine the perfect time to harvest for the best flavor and texture. And yes, overproduction is a real thing. One zucchini plant can easily feed a household. If you want to avoid squash overload, stagger your plantings by sowing new seeds every 2 to 3 weeks during the early part of summer, especially if you live in a long-growing zone. This will ensure a continuous harvest without overwhelming you with squash all at once. Beginner tip: share your extra squash with friends, neighbors, or local food banks. It's a great way to spread the gardening love. If you want to grow squash vertically, look for compact or bush-type varieties. Use a sturdy trellis or A-frame, and be sure to support developing fruits with slings or mesh netting if they start getting heavy. Vertical growing not only saves space, but also improves air circulation and makes pest control easier. Beginner tip: when training squash to grow vertically, gently guide the vines up the trellis and tie them in place with soft twine or plant clips. Some great summer squash varieties to try are Black Beauty zucchini, golden scallop, and tromboncino, which can climb. For winter squash, look into butternut, delicata, red curry, and spaghetti squash, all of which store well and offer unique flavors. Experiment with different varieties to find your favorites. Beginner tip: consider your local climate and growing conditions when choosing squash varieties. Some varieties are better suited to certain regions than others. So, to sum it up, give your squash plenty of space, feed the soil well, water deeply, keep an eye out for pests, and harvest at the right time. And you'll have more squash than you know what to do with. It's a forgiving crop once you know the rhythm, and once it gets going, it just doesn't stop. Now it's your turn. Let me know in the comments, what's your favorite type of squash to grow or cook? Have you dealt with vine borers or squash bugs before? I'd love to hear your tips and tricks. And if you found this episode helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and keep following along as we work through the full library of plant growing guides here on EcoAlchemy. Until next time, keep your hands dirty and your hearts in the garden.